Welcome to Song Album Career. I'm Chris Bragg, and that's David Thurmaier. And today we'll be talking about a band that was very short-lived, but had impact. So today's episode is Career, Velvet Underground. And Dave, I thought I'd start with a big question. Is this the greatest all-time difference between career and legacy in a band?
Ooh, so you're thinking because the group only had 4 albums, really, that they kind of did. It was a very short-lived recording career, but yet they had such a long...
And not just that, but the impact while they were recording.
Yes.
The albums come out, I think one of them charted about
Pretty
199. Dysfunction in the recording company, not putting the albums out correctly.
Yeah.
And they didn't even really tour in the way that bands usually tour. They just go to places they like and then keep going back, like Boston Tea Party and in Cole Avenue and places like that, across, sort of scattered across the country. Never really built up a huge following while they were active, and then afterwards just grew and grew and grew. It's almost like you've seen it before in films, like It's a Wonderful Life, big flop when it came out.
Yeah.
Over the years has grown. Night of the Hunter, a few films like that. But I can't think of another band that when they existed were so kind of ignored.
Well, that's really great. I was wondering if, like, maybe you could frame it and say, are they the best or most influential band that you've never heard of? In a way, because they like you said, they only existed from 66-ish until 70. Then Lou Reed quits. It's over.
Well,
sort of. I mean, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. It's a little more complicated, but
yeah.
But I mean, to have such an impact and such a powerful legacy with such a small output is pretty impressive. And even more so to have this impact and have all of this recording going on at a time where they seemed just completely out of what was going on. They're, the books that we were looking at, we're talking about how they're recording the Banana album during when the Beatles are doing Sgt. Pepper and it's psychedelia and all of this. And here's a group that's just completely anti-psychedelic.
And not just that, but subject matter wise, underground is the perfect word for it, because they're really talking about New York life and the quote unquote dregs of society, people who are taking drugs, people who are into some sadomasochism and things of that nature, and not judging the subjects necessarily, but just talking about those types of subject matter. First group to do that. That's just the subject matter too. We also talk about the music. Definitely pushes the boundaries. Definitely gets into the avant-garde. Definitely like experimental, and so with their legacy though, I just wanted to mention the influence of the band on future bands. I mean, even songs like The Gift, which a lot of people don't even like The Gift as a song, probably don't listen to it a lot. But do you get Patti Smith's Horses?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for The Gift, and you can hear the influence of Velvet Underground, punk and metal.
Definitely, metal. Yeah, so many different things, and their own music is really. Sometimes it's hard to see the influences, but it kind of makes sense. You've got obviously Lou Reed is very Dylan influenced in his style of singing and delivery. You've got John Cale with the classical avant-garde background. That's also a trend that would carry on through other prog rock and other sorts of musicians, and then Mo Tucker and Sterling Morrison. So it's quite a hybrid of different ideas and different genres and styles that they put into their music that then synthesized into this kind of mind-blowing thing that went off in different paths.
Yeah, I think what you're saying too is it's sort of because there's so many different things going into the pot of Velvet Underground. oh, this one song influences a whole genre of music.
Yeah.
So
Even I was thinking grunge too. I mean, somebody like Kurt Cobain or somebody, you have to look at Lou Reed in the 70s and in the late 60s as somebody you're modeling after in their style, what they're talking about, the type of writing, the lyrics, just the realness of it, I think is something that people, whether it's true or not, because we know Lou Reed was very complicated, but there's an authenticity, I think, that the Velvet Underground has that I think a lot of later groups really found attractive. They're just telling like it is. Hey, white boy, what you doing uptown? Gotta just laying it out. What's happening here?
Dave, I'm curious. I think anytime we talk about these careers, I think we'll probably ask this question. What was your first exposure to the group, and are you a fan of the group?
I honestly don't know. I don't. For the first question, I don't know where my first exposure was. I want to say it might have been with you, at least because I know we talked about them a lot, and we realized that we like them, but I don't know. I think I'd heard of Lou Reed from Walk on the Wild Side, of course, because you heard that on the radio all the time. Maybe
not just that, but in our youth, it was a commercial.
Oh yeah,
for a scooter, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
Lou Reed, it would be Walk on the Wild Side. Then he'd say, "Don't settle for walking." At the end of it.
Yeah, I wish I had a great story of how I got into them, or what my first exposure was. But as to, am I a fan? Absolutely a fan. Yeah.
I'm a fan for definitely for sure. I had a band way back when in high school, and I must have known before that because we played Sweet Jane was one of the first. Which is pretty relatively easy for the beginning guitarist to pluck through.
You got the riff, and then it's got that weird middle section though. That
the Heavenly Wine and Roses section.
Yes, it's got that.
That they edited
very
out
badly.
Of the choppily edited out of the shorter versions of it.
Yeah.
But I distinctly remember buying a cassette, which I was looking for, I couldn't find. So it must be my nephew probably lost it, like he did a few things. But the best of the Velvet Underground Words and Music of Lou Reed. A compilation album released in '89, I believe, by Verve. And it just kind of ran through. But it also had Stephanie Says on it, which you and me, there's a
history there.
Probably off-key version of that, kicking around with you and me singing that from way back when.
I remember playing that one.
Because we were trying to figure out the background vocals.
Stephanie Says.
Me. There's one of them is just going, me. From across the world.
Great song.
Great tune. But so we're definitely big fans. As we look at the discography, as we go through it, we're going to mention what we have. I would think that we have probably the 4 main albums in some form on CD. Is that correct, Dave?
That is correct, yes.
So that's the Velvet Underground and Nico. That was released in '67. Then in '68, White Light, White Heat. And then the Velvet Underground, which is the one with them, sort of the gray album, as they
sitting
call it.
On the couch.
And Loaded, which was in 1970. Now, I have all those in CD, but I think I lost Velvet Underground and Nico along the way somewhere. It was stolen or something.
Oh,
but it's part of the Peel Slowly and See box sets, which I also purchased.
Yes, I see it back there. Yeah.
So I didn't repurchase that one. And then Loaded, I bought a couple times because I bought Fully Loaded. Remember the Fully Loaded?
I do. It had disc 1 and disc 2. Wasn't it 2-disc set?
Yeah, it's 2-disc set, and it's got a funky. This one I'll actually hold up here because it's got a funky little.
Does
that thing, And then all of those came out again in deluxe editions in 2002. And then all of them have come out now in 45th anniversary. Why 45th anniversary instead of waiting 5 years for the 50th? I don't know. But they all come out in these big 6-disc box sets of all of these, which I think is great because all of these albums have different mixes.
Mm-hmm. Like mono mixes.
A mono mix, and then the Lou Reed closet mix of Velvet Underground. And so they collect both of those mixes, and then you've got a whole bunch, 2 albums worth of outtakes, which we'll get into here shortly. But anyway, these 45th anniversary collects all that and collects live shows that kind of relate to the eras of the 4 albums,
which fortunately you can listen to on any streaming service. So that's how I've been able to get them, is through Spotify. And yeah, like you said, it's surprised, we've heard some of the outtakes before on the box set you have behind you or other places, but some of the live stuff I've never heard before, and other mixes. So I think that seems to be a trend nowadays, because all these big box sets seem to have either ultimate mixes or the special kinds of mixes and things. So that seems to be what people are doing now, getting everything out.
I won't be surprised if at some point we'll get a release with a new mix of it, because that's another trend.
Yep.
The Beatles catalog, we're very familiar. We do a Beatles podcast, so we're very familiar with these. Every year, new Beatles mix is coming out from Giles Martin, which is taking the original source material and creating new mix that's able to add to the bass a little bit and
bring things out,
bring some things out that are on the recordings. Now, I'm not sure what they could do with white heat to fix it, because the recording was the problem, because they recorded it way too loud.
There's kind of a lo-fi, not caring kind of we're just laying tunes down, and we don't care how they sound. We don't care how it goes. We're just going to record these. And like, especially that album, really, you can try to clean it up, but there's only so much you can do with it. But I find like all 4 of them are recorded very differently and have very different kinds of sounds in terms of production.
I watched a lot of stuff online preparing for this, and one of them was a Doug Yule interview. And he was talking about the difference between just recording the Velvet Underground album and recording Loaded. In that Velvet Underground album was like a band playing, and then Loaded was like, he said there was no more than 2 people at a time in the studio, and they were recording different parts, and Doug Yule was recording some of the drums, and
a lot of overdubs.
A bunch of different people played drums. Maureen Tucker's not on that one. And so he's like, Loaded's not really a band. It's just sort of like an album that we pieced together that has some good stuff on it for sure. Whereas Velvet Underground sounds like an actual band that plays together. Taking these 4 albums, though, you do get this sense of the first 2 and the second 2.
Yes.
And so why is that, Dave?
All 4 of the albums have different personnel. There's no album that has the same group, which is also kind of an interesting fact about it. So you've got the first album has the core 4 plus Nico. And then you've got White Light, White Heat, which has no Nico on it. And then the Velvet Underground, which has no John Cale, but Doug Yule brought in. And then the last album has, like you said, a whole bunch of people, and it's kind of
no Maureen Tucker.
No Maureen Tucker,
pregnant at the time. But the big difference, I think, and this brings us to a question here. One of our big
you have the first 2 albums with John Cale playing bass and viola and singing, and then the other 2 albums that don't have him on it. And so my question that I've always wondered about is, in your case, which Velvet Underground do you prefer, with John Cale or without John Cale?
Ooh, it's tough because I really enjoy the 3rd album a lot, and I really, really love some of the tracks on the 4th album. but I gotta go with John Cale, because with John Cale, they're more experimental, more pushing the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
The second album is very experimental and very, very loud and noisy.
Tough to listen to in certain times.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily the most enjoyable listen. So if I'm grabbing an album and my choice is between the second and the third one, I might grab the third one rather than the second one. However, the ideas that are in the second one, the ideas that are in the first one, the subject matter that is in those, and not just that, but Lou got started and hooked up with John, and John helped Lou out.
Yeah.
And then we saw kind of like once Lou broke free of the Velvet Underground, he was a little lost. And if you look through Lou's solo career, a lot of his better albums have a great producer behind it, or somebody else helping him out. Not to say that Lou's solo career isn't also great, but we'll get to Lou's solo career
another time,
some other time. But I think John Cale, like for instance, they would take tunes and then detune them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that came from Cale's training. You and I met at the University of Illinois in the music department.
Mm-hmm.
And we, were exposed to a different type of music than a lot of people get exposed to. And I think John Cale similarly exposed to more avant-garde music.
Yes, so where we went to school was very avant-garde and still is in some ways, but it was, I think John Cale would have been right at home at U of I, kind of with some of the composition faculty and some of the ideas that were going on there. And that does come into the first two albums a lot.
Are they comfortable listens, the first two albums? Not always, no.
Right.
In some cases, I don't really listen to a couple tracks. I usually skippers, but those tracks are still like the aforementioned Gift, maybe a lot more valuable than a catchy Lonesome Cowboy Bill or something from the last album that probably didn't influence anybody.
No.
It's a tough call, because it is like, to some extent, a lot of people say their favorite album's the third one.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on it, Dave?
That's a good segue, because my favorite is the third album, which is almost flawless all the way through. Although Murder Mystery you have to be kind of in the mood for, but the rest of it is pretty impressive. But I would say two things: that the tension that between Cale and Reed is kind of what makes the Velvet Underground. You've got this avant-garde trained classical musician with this punk rocker, 50s rocker, kind of literate, hyper literate, really kind of stressed, neurotic guy, and you put that energy together and then throw Andy Warhol and Nico in, and it's just a great blend of all sorts of influences. And so I would have to probably say with Cale, and what gives me proof is when we go to the reunion tour, which I see back there, or when they got back together in 1993, I believe.
93.
Which you can watch. There's a great concert on YouTube, and John Cale just fits right back in. All that time later, he takes Nico's parts. He sings them well. Yeah, they're terrific.
His All Tomorrow's Parties is so great. So excellent from that collection.
Yeah. So I think that shows that he's really integral to the group, and they did kind of lose something, most certainly by Loaded. I mean, that we can talk about that, but it's not got the same group synergy that you had with those first two.
I think part of that, Lou got so tired of clashing, I think. And so what he wanted was like a yes man.
Yeah.
And Doug Yule seems to be like, Lou must have saw Doug Yule and was like, that's like a younger me. He sounds a lot like him.
Yeah, he does.
So much so, he sings a lot of the lead vocals, and some very well.
Yes.
New Age, Oh Sweet Nothing, I Found a Reason, and
Who Loves the Sun?
Who Loves the Sun, Candy Says.
Yeah.
So a lot of the vocals, and he does a pretty good job at the vocals. So here's a question: is Doug Yule underrated? Is he good?
It's funny, one book that we were both looking at is called Uptight, the Velvet Underground Story. There's some info about Doug Yule and kind of how he was brought in and what they thought of him. And I think, yeah, some of what you said is really true, that it's like he looks sort of like Lou and sounds like him. But he's also young and kind of, talented musician, will do what he's asked in a way. There became some tension later that he said, "Oh, I did more than I was given credit for." But is he underrated? I think he, in a weird way, yeah, I do. I think he does add more of a polish, I guess. That's the big difference in that third album to me, is that it sounds a lot more polished and a lot more professional. Whereas the first album has just got its unique sound. The second album sounds like a garage band, and then the third album really sounds more like a band and musically better.
Yeah, I think he's very slightly underrated as far as he has a pretty good voice. I think, does great with vocals, and hearing them live, most of the live recordings that are worth a damn are from that era. Probably because they played way too loud. Now there was an incident where all their gear was stolen, so all of their Vox amps that they were playing so loudly, which is why a lot of the early bootlegs that are out there of the earlier era are kind of like garbage sounding, because it's just too loud to have captured correctly, especially with the guy recording it off his cassette tape with his little thing. But you hear Doug Yule a little more there, and I think there's a pretty complimentary vocals to Lou. He played bass, but he also played other instruments, and he played he actually played drums on Rock and Roll, I think. And so he does have that. Now he's tainted forever though by the fact that the manager convinced him to keep the band going after Lou left.
Bad idea.
One of the worst purchases of my life was I bought at a bootleg convention. I was like, "Oh, this is from 1971. Awesome." And then I got it home, and then I realized, oh, that's with Doug Yule, Maureen Tucker still in the band, and then a couple other guys that brought in. And not great, not terrible, but not great. But he kept it even going.
Wasn't that album Squeeze or something?
That's right. Yeah. And he recorded an album and released an album called Squeeze, which has been on lists forever as one of the all-time worst albums and stuff like that, because it's called Velvet Underground.
Yeah.
If it was just called Doug Yule and you listen to it, it's actually not bad. And it has a couple good tracks on it that sound very similar to, like, would have fit in perfectly on Loaded, written by Doug Yule. But yeah, it's I
didn't know all the rest of that history.
Very unfortunate. I think it's because of their manager, who definitely wanted to keep the Velvet Underground going.
Get the name, of course.
Get the name going. So I think he talked Doug Yule into, like, well, we've still got a record contract. You can release another record. I think Doug Yule's been like despised tarnished for years and tarnished forever by this thing where it's like, well, he's lost his band. He's just trying to keep a living going, So I don't blame him that much. And it, like I said, I really don't think it's that terrible of an album. Well, it is not considered canon. No. Velvet Underground.
Here's an interesting question I found out doing some research on this. I really didn't know this, but as you've mentioned, we do a Beatles podcast, so there is a Beatles potential connection here. What would have happened if Brian Epstein, who was supposedly asked to manage or to take a look at the Velvet Underground, but then he died in 1967, what would have happened if Brian Epstein had taken management of the Velvet Underground? What a crazy thought. I mean,
it is a crazy thought. Well, maybe he turns him into a international sensation.
Yeah.
Like he did with the Beatles. I would certainly think he would have done a better job than the manager that they ended up with.
Exactly, with the awful record deals and meddling from the record companies and the poor touring and sort of haphazard gigs and all that stuff.
Well, even once they left, MGM wasn't doing them any favors either. Once they left MGM, they were on the new label. At least they got some support on that last album.
Yeah.
Of course, Lou had left the band by the time that the singles came out, but Rock and Roll and Sweet Jane at least were getting some play. Now Lou, of course, too, is like they chopped up my song.
He was not happy.
Happy with it.
He claimed that they redid all they got rid of his vocals and changed everything, and that Doug Yule went in and just changed stuff. And who knows? But
now Lou in the era as a songwriter, can we talk about that just a little bit? Like, what's your now? I used to have a book, Dave, called Between Thought and Expression, which is a beautiful looking little book, and it was just Lou's the words from.
I have that at home.
His songs. Yeah. You do. Great. I lost my copy somewhere. My stupid nephew again. No, I don't want to blame my nephew. I'm just always just trying to manage things. Like
I know there's too many things going on.
And then I was going through Peel Slowly and seeing, and I'm like, where's disc 5? So I'm missing a disc from that. So
probably in a CD player you got rid of some time ago, or on a move or something, it gets lost.
Yeah, but Lou, as particularly as a lyricist,
want to look at him in terms of his development, or kind of just did he develop? From Heroin, which was one of his first kind of big songs, to let's go to Sweet Jane or Rock and Roll or Cool It Down or any of those later tunes. Did he develop? I mean, there's a grittiness, and he's always got a New York sort of street vibe to everything he wrote, I think. Yeah, but there's also a little, he's not always that way. There can also be kind of a vulnerability and a sweetness too in some of his tunes.
Like I Found a Reason, and these beautiful love songs hidden throughout the Velvet Underground catalog. He has a career-long blank says kind of thing going on with Candy Says, Lisa Says,
Stephanie Says,
yeah. And all of these songs really bring out the humanity of a third person character more so than many other songwriters, where you can really step into the shoes of Candy, who was written about Candy Darling, who was this is back in the 60s, 70s, a transgender person, and he's treating the character with a lot of humanity and with sort of honoring the characters he's writing about. So I find his music to be very moving to me because of that.
Well, like I said earlier in the episode, we talked about how Lou is very influenced by Bob Dylan, but Bob Dylan, a lot of his lyrics, especially before this time, were very literary and much more poetic. I think Lou's lyrics aren't quite Dylan-esque. I don't think they're in the same way. It's much more of a direct kind of focus on the subject.
Yeah, not a lot of flighty poeticism.
No, not at all.
So
it's really kind of, he's a reporter in some ways. He's like sort of telling what's going on, what he sees, like run, or I'm waiting for my man, just kind of laying it out. This is what's happening. This is what a drug deal, or this is something that's happening, or here's what happens to a heroin addict. This is what they're feeling. There is kind of, I like the way you put it. There's that kind of human sense to all of these.
It's sort of like snapshots of real life.
Yeah.
Rather than, most of the other music at the time was, love songs and incense and peppermints type thing, so to like really be talking about what's really happening on the streets, I think is like revelatory.
Yeah.
And you would continue that through his solo career.
Oh, definitely.
Some kicks pops into my mind.
But there's a lot of beautiful, like he writes good love songs too. He can write like Pale Blue Eyes, or that's the gem obviously a lot of people think about. But even Sunday Morning, I mean, it's a beautiful song, and musically, lyrically, love songs that are just so heartfelt.
Well, when Warhol was like, hey, you're gonna have Nico in the album, in the band, and so throws Nico into the mix. We'll get to Nico here in a minute.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, okay, and Lou seems to be like, okay, I'll write some cool songs for Nico, and wrote these beautiful songs for Nico, just very easily,
Yeah. So I'll Be Your Mirror is just gorgeous.
Yeah. So there's a couple of missing albums. Okay. And we get these outtake albums, basically. One was released VU, and one was released called Another View. Do you have both of these, Dave?
I have the one with the what is it, like a meter, VU meter? It's like is that that one? That's
VU.
That's VU. Yeah, I have that one. Yeah.
What we have are these sessions that happened. One was sessions that happened with John Cale still. So there's several songs that didn't make White Light, White Heat, or were recorded shortly thereafter. One of which is Hey Mr. Rain, which I just
it's one of your favorites. I know.
Just love it. And the live version they do in 93 of Hey Mr. Rain is like fantastic. Just like Lou's just like really shredding it.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole album that we aren't sure, and everybody doesn't have their story straight on whether they were making a fourth album for MGM that never came out. But just a lot of tracks were recorded, at least for MGM. Maybe it was for singles, maybe it was for a fourth album. And so most of those come out at, for such a short-lived band to have two full compilation B-side type albums come out. And one of them charted higher than any of the albums that they had ever had out. It's just an incredible amount of outtakes. Of course, Peel Slowly and See collects them all. These 45th anniversary versions have all of this. And I think that they've even done a reformulated, what they call 1969 album that you can find on vinyl. What do you think all these B-sides, all this supplemental material?
I don't know a lot of it, actually. I was going to ask you about you said a 1969 album. Would it have been after the Velvet Underground and before Loaded, or it was from that period? Because I'm thinking of what was the song? Foggy Notion, isn't that one of the tunes that's on that's from that period? And
Temptation Inside Your Heart, Foggy Notion.
So Mo Tucker was still on it then. So it was still group, the four, Doug Yule, and
Ocean being one of them.
That's a good one.
Lisa Says, which he'd redo. She's My Best Friend. Stephanie Says.
There's a lot of good tunes on those. Yeah. That's interesting. I think the way I would read it is that it comes down to marketing. It comes down to the record company's lack of interest. This group isn't making us any money. They're not selling any records, so they can just keep recording, but we're not going to put it out. So it's probably very depressing for them to have such poor success and not get to use all these, because those are the tunes you rattle off there are really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of great tunes, and a lot of them would be re-recorded by Lou in his solo career, and quite frankly, a lot worse versions of it. I Can't Stand It comes to mind. I don't like the Lou version on Lou Reed, the first Lou Reed album. So it does bulk up their catalog a little bit, these outtake albums. Now they also released these live albums, 1969, the two what I like to call the underwear covers.
Yes.
And then the Max's Kansas City, which when it originally came out, I think the sound quality on it was terrible, and Sterling Morrison was like, don't even play that for me, I hate it. But I think they improved the sound quality when they included it on the more recent longer things. Now in the past maybe 15 years, they have also done the bootleg series volume 1, the Quine tapes.
Yes, I remember when that came out. That was good. It was very good stuff.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And then I like the complete Matrix tapes. I think those are worth a listen, particularly because it's like apparently a few nights in a row at a place, and they'll play one song one night and it'll be 20 minutes long, and then they played it again a couple nights later and it was 4 minutes. Now, featured on all this live stuff, and somebody we haven't talked about yet is Sterling Morrison.
Yeah.
So what's your take on Sterling Morrison?
Fascinating character. Here's somebody who became an English professor, just quit rock and roll and became an English professor in Texas. Like he's sort of a George Harrison type to me, somebody who plays the song and not flashy, not, Lou was the one doing all the feedback and all the really crazy stuff, I think. But tasteful, especially on that third album, really tasteful licks, good playing. So solid, sort of Harrison-like, I'd say.
Well, if you think of like what goes on, I think his rhythm playing keeps that song chugging along.
Yes, the drive, the feel.
And you can really tell in once again the reunion. And it's like we haven't even heard him in 20 years at that point. Doing anything. And all of a sudden he's back on stage with them, and they all sound fantastic. They're all just like fantastic, and it really like makes a difference. So I think he's mildly underrated, probably because he just didn't have much of a career after that.
No, and then it was sad because a couple of years after that reunion, then he died of leukemia or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or something. So just when they were, got that little reunion tour and recording from that, getting back into things, then unfortunately he died. So
of course we do have that MCMXCII. Do you like the album title of the
what an original
reunion
title? Not good.
I don't know why they did that. No. With all this stuff, there's also bootlegs. And I've got a bootleg called Take a Trip, which is another date of that. A couple other famous bootlegs, Boston Tea Party, at In Cole Avenue, which is I think where they got 1969 from, but it's like a more complete version of it. And then of course I have Live in Amsterdam 1971, which is bad one. But I also have something called the Bedroom Tape, which is Lou and Nico kind of hanging out and playing together. So I wanted to bring that up because what's your take on Nico?
Talk about a unique figure. Here's this German blonde, slim woman. Like she's, I want to say from Andy Warhol, he's thinking artistically, probably for, let's make this group. We've got these 3 guys who are kind of hipster guys looking really cool. We've got Mo Tucker on drums, and then let's put this totally flashy, just like stunning kind of German woman with her accent in the front of the group here. And so you can't think of that album, that first album, without her. She's a huge part of it. It's an acquired taste. I think her singing style, it's not for everybody, but
I think she has one of those voices that the timbre of the voices is not everybody's cup of tea.
Exactly.
I'm really into Richard Thompson. Similarly, he has a voice that when I play it to some other people, they're like, not for me.
And she's like that too. I think
she's like that too. I think she's really fantastic on her first solo record, which is so much of a Velvet Underground sort of like side record that they include it on the super deluxe of the Velvet Underground and Nico in its entirety.
Yep.
And it has some great tracks on it called These Days. And
well, that's a song. I'm a huge Jackson Browne fan, and that was by Jackson Browne. And so she sang that. So that's kind of a interesting pairing.
Yeah. And Lou's on it. And John Cale continued his relationship with Nico for many years. So much so that have you heard this live at La Bataclan 1972, where it's Lou Reed, John Cale, and Nico?
No, I didn't even know they did that.
Oh, it's very, very cool. Lou plays some new track. He plays Berlin, I think.
Oh, like his tracks.
Yeah, his tracks. And John plays some of his solo stuff, and Nico plays some of her stuff. But they're sort of like the three of them. And here it is, a couple years after Velvet Underground's disappeared, and here they pop up for like a concert, and somebody captured it pretty well. So I'd definitely check that one out if you haven't taken it. And of course, Nico's Chelsea Girl, and of course the aforementioned Songs for Drella.
Yeah.
Which is from the late 80s, right after Andy died. Lou had the good idea to let's do a little tribute to them, called up John Cale, and they do this album. I think there's a live performance out there.
There is, yeah.
And just I really like that album. I think it's very underrated, and it's certainly, if you're a Velvet Underground aficionado and you haven't listened to that album, then you should definitely take a listen, because it not just is the two of them playing together, but they're referencing their whole career and Andy's life, and they take turns sort of playing the character of Andy in song. Yeah. Do you like that one? Do you have
that's great. When we talk, we're gonna hopefully maybe we'll do a career Lou Reed, kind of a separate and then we could definitely get into that, and Songs for Drella and Magic and Loss, and some of the really highlights. And there's also a lot of lowlights, unfortunately, in Lou's solo catalog, including some pretty
Mistrial.
Some pretty awful instrumental choices that we'll get into when we get there.
The bass, that 80s bass, whoa, wow. Oh yeah. So with all these careers, I want to do this list, Dave. So we're gonna do that.
Okay.
Best album.
Well, for me, it'd be the third one, the Velvet Underground.
I gotta go with
the first.
I know it's probably trite, but I'm going with the first album, which I think on the recent Rolling Stone list, the much debated Rolling Stone list, was number 23. All four records made their top 500. White Light, White Heat was 272, Loaded 242. Velvet Underground was 143, and Velvet Underground and Nico was 23. Such a great album. Such a fantastic album. Worst album, that's obvious. Squeeze.
Yes, which I've never even heard. So it sounds terrible. I don't even want to hear it. So
it's not as bad as you think, or as people make it out to be, but it's not great.
It's not great, and it's not Velvet Underground either.
Yeah, so because it's the shaming. You should get some shaming for it coming out under the Velvet Underground name.
Yes, just for that alone,
should have never happened. But I even think like one of the songs, Friends, I think is a song on there that's been covered by a couple people. So it's not like the most the worst sounding thing you've ever heard. Best song.
Oh, impossible. I mean, because they're so different. It depends what you're looking for. So if you're thinking like a best rocker, maybe Sweet Jane. Best, like my favorites, I love Cool It Down. Is just one of my favorite tunes. Got such a great feel.
Oh, there's a cover there, not a cover, but an alternate version on that set of that, with the pianos really brought out that sort of like that churning kind of piano. It's really great.
Oh, great. Yeah, check that out. But in terms of iconic songs, like when you got to go with something like Heroin, or
I'm gonna vote Heroin just because it's like so
it's got
altering to everything. It's like the ground completely moves. We didn't really talk about this, but they're a band that has such dynamic range, which I've always been drawn to. Dynamics musically, dynamics emotionally too, but tempo. They play with tempo, and Heroine's a perfect example of that, where the song is designed to get faster and slower to mimic what it really feels like when it, the
rush,
and when I'm closing in on death, that kind of thing. So I'm going with Heroine.
I'll go with it too, because it has the key elements of Velvet Underground, because you have the John Cale viola, you have Mo Tucker's kind of tom-tom type of drumming, you've got Lou, it's sort of got everything in it.
Worst song, Dave. Biggest dud.
Now
this is an outtake, but I gotta go with
you first.
Ferry Boat Bill. Have you heard Ferry Boat Bill, Dan?
Not in a long time. No.
Oh my God. I want to read from this. This is a really nice little book here, Velvet Underground by Peter Hogan, Complete Guide to the Music of. And I think he has a second book that's a little bigger than this tiny book, which covers Velvet Underground and the solo catalogs of Nico, John Cale, and Lou. And got a great laugh out of this. Ferry Boat Bill, throwaway self-indulgence built around an incredibly lame joke.
Terrible.
So I know it was an outtake. So we're like,
well, let me put you on the spot. If you had to pick an actual one of the 4 album tracks, I know.
Maybe the Murder Mystery, just because it's an experiment that didn't work.
Yeah, with the 2 different sides, the 2 speakers going, and
maybe Lonesome Cowboy Bill.
Yeah, that's pretty lame.
I don't know. That's a tough.
It is hard. I mean, so I would say, like, I Heard Her Call My Name is pretty unlistenable for the most part. I have a hard time listening to that because it's just so loud and feedbacky. It just, I wouldn't say it's the worst, but I'd say sort of unlistenable.
I like it.
I know you like it. Yeah.
Crank that thing up.
Crank up Sister Ray too.
Put it through the amp here.
Oh yeah. Do you crank up Sister Ray as well?
I usually don't listen to Sister Ray, but when I catch it, sometimes I'm like, oh man, it's really great.
Yeah, it's just so over the top that there's something kind of cool about it. I don't know. I don't really think there are any really bad duds. Like duds.
Yeah, not any duds. We use and just for everybody who hasn't spent years listening to our podcast, we use the word duds lightheartedly.
Yes.
And, we absolutely adore the Velvet Underground. When we say duds or what's the worst song or whatever, we're just trying to analyze things and compare it. Like the worst Velvet Underground song is way better than the best
other group,
other crappy.
Exactly.
What's that 90s group with the douchebag who has his hat on backwards? That one.
That's not Spin Doctors, is it?
Oh, Spin Doctor. I once saw a Spin Doctors. I got free tickets to a Spin Doctors concert, and I went because the opening band was the Suede Chain, which you and I know from our years in Champaign.
Mm-hmm.
Great local band.
Yeah,
that should have been a huge hit. Check out the Suede Chain if you can.
Yeah,
I'm sure they're on iTunes and all that. But the Spin Doctors started, and I was there with my friend Bill Harriet, and and 2 songs in, he just turns to me. He's like, I think I got some homework to do or something. And I stayed maybe one more song, and I was like, yeah, I'm out.
Enough. Yeah.
So apologies to all the Spin Doctors fans. But, okay, and then here's one. Most underrated song. I'm going with I'm Set Free.
That is a great tune.
Great tune, and it has like such a beautiful guitar solo in it.
That's a good choice. It's short. I like That's the Story of My Life.
Oh yeah,
that's a cool tune.
A good choice.
Yeah, I like the short, and also Here She Comes Now. Since I was ragging on White Light, White Heat a little bit, I think that's like a breath of fresh air when that comes in, and it grooves hard too.
Oh yeah. One of Maureen Tucker's real gems there.
Yeah,
Maureen Tucker, by the way, I think is just very, very underrated.
Very,
just in general. Maybe that's the underrated gem is Maureen Tucker.
Yeah, and even her singing, because we like her singing too, like After Hours, and what's the other one?
What is
I'm sticking with you.
Oh yeah, I'm sticking with you. The outtake. The thing about After Hours and her singing in it is it wouldn't work if Lou sang.
No.
You have to have someone who's like very like sort of shy and vulnerable to sing that song. So it was perfect idea to give that song to her, and it's really
and close the album too, which is perfect.
The album. Yeah. So, Dave, do you have the information on the upcoming documentary?
Yeah, a little bit. I was reading it yesterday. It's going to be coming out. I don't know the date exactly, but this year, I think was what it said on Apple Plus, and it's directed by Todd Haynes, who was the same guy who did I'm Not There, the Bob Dylan movie. That was kind of a big deal. That was kind of a very artsy sort of pseudo biography. So I think it looks pretty good.
Couldn't be more excited to have a documentary come out than one on the Velvet Underground, which I think is like, because when you try to go find some stuff to watch, it's difficult.
There's not
really
much.
Old stuff. There's something called the South Bank Show 1986, which you can check out on YouTube. We'll put links to this stuff.
But the other thing about that too, it said that it would have interviews with John Cale and Mo Tucker, and that he did complete a bunch of it before Lou Reed died, or he got some interviews before Lou Reed died, so that'll help too.
Yeah, that's excellent. There in the South Bank Show, there's John Cale is in rare form, just very like he's sitting like in this chair in his back porch or something. It's worth a look on YouTube. Also, there's a John Cale documentary on YouTube as well. It's about an hour long. That has some good information about Velvet Underground. Definitely had Mo Tucker interviewed in it.
I think he'd be a fascinating person to talk to. John Cale.
Well, he's got he's had an odd career.
Yeah.
And a very acquired taste type solo career, but I like a lot of his solo stuff, and maybe we'll get into it one of these shows. Also, I did a lot of reading for this, so I just want to bring up some of the Peel Slowly and See booklet is pretty cool. Now, these booklets, Dave, are, that were in CD form, I find to be harder and harder to read as I get older.
That's true. You need your reading glasses.
And not only that, but like they have like red on.
It's bad. Yes.
It's like when you do all this colorful, like artistic kind of cool thing with the thing, sometimes it makes it's very difficult to.
It's like looking at movies with subtitles that are white on white or something. You just can't even make out what's being said at all.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. There's the Peter Hogan book I mentioned, The Complete Guide to the Music of Velvet Underground. He has a second book called Dead Straight Guide to the Velvet Underground. Both you and I have Uptight, the Velvet Underground story, which I also find to be very difficult to look at. It's Victor Bacchus and Gerard Malanga.
It's kind of in like hard to look at in terms of the font or just the way to read it. It's kind of
It's like all fat,
jumbly
and all over the place, and the design is crazy.
Yeah,
but otherwise it would be a really easy read because it's
interviews,
oral history type version. You can see back there, I've got the Anthony DeCurtis Lou Reed book, which I honestly haven't been able to get to yet, but I'm very excited to read through that. And I wish I could get my hands on those 45th anniversary full books.
Yeah, no.
That's the reason to buy these CD box set big things, which both of us have bought all of the Beatles ones.
Yeah.
Are the books. The books are fantastic in all of those. And
and all the recording info and who played on what and who produced this or that and what dates, all that stuff. We just thrive on all that stuff. We love all the minutia of so and so played maracas on this one track.
Yeah.
So that's the reason to get these nice books. And same with those Dylan sets. I wish we could get some of those big Dylan sets that have the books.
Yeah, like the 1966 one where it's like 35 discs, I think.
Every single blonde on blonde take and Highway 61 and all that. Yeah.
So I thought we'd end all these episodes with a recommendation. So first, if you're just getting started on the Velvet Underground, I think you still go with the albums. I don't think you go with the greatest hits.
No.
Because you don't quite get the... Now, I said earlier that
that's what you did, though, hypocrite.
Yeah. So, but I still think I'm pretty sure I probably listened to that and then I quickly bought like the first Velvet Underground and Nico.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the starting point.
Yeah.
Get Velvet Underground and Nico.
Too.
If you like it, then you're gonna love the rest of the catalog, I think. Right?
Yeah, I would also start with that first. It's celebrated and famous for a reason. It's kind of where it all began, and it's got the star power of Andy Warhol and Nico, and and it's got a lot of their most famous songs on it too that they would keep playing on those live discs you were talking about.
Now, if you're a streamer, if you have the streaming services, and you're a fan of the Velvet Underground already, you got to dig into these 45th anniversary sets. Particularly the Velvet Underground and Nico has a whole disc's worth that they found an acetate it's a completely different mixes on all of the tracks that you get a little tired of hearing the same version of the same tracks all the time.
Yeah.
You just got the mono set of the Beatles mono masters.
Yes.
And just to hear the different mix of
it's like hearing it for the first time again, or you just notice stuff you never heard before.
Exactly. So I would recommend that get into those 45th anniversary set. It's wonderful when they're available online like that.
Mm-hmm.
Songs for Drella. I just want to say, check out Songs for Drella. If you were recommending some solo stuff from Lou to someone who's a Velvet Underground fan, is there a one? I mean, Transformers, obviously.
That's the obvious one that I would probably start with. I'd avoid Metal Machine music.
I want to say Berlin. I love Berlin. It's an excellent album. It's produced by
Bob Ezrin.
So it does a wonderful job in it, and it tells a full story, and it's a dark, sad kind of thing. So if you like Velvet Underground, the darker side of Velvet Underground, I think you're gonna like Berlin. And then I love the 80s album Magic and Lost.
That's what I was going to recommend too. We'll have to talk about that one at some point.
And then I just want to mention for Cale, John Cale, try Fragments of a Rainy Season. It's a live album, and it's just John on the piano and singing. And he goes through a lot of his hit songs, kind of. Not that John Cale has huge hits.
Loosely described, yeah.
It's good toe dip into the world of John Cale, and then you can get into some of the more esoteric, which is his old catalog.
Yeah,
is pretty odd and esoteric. I haven't heard the Maureen Tucker solo stuff.
No. I don't even know if did Sterling do any solo things. I don't think he really did. I think he sort of gave just checked out, had enough.
And of course, Nico's got a few things, and those are worth that first one for sure is worth a listen.
Definitely.
But you can get that in that aforementioned 45th anniversary set. So, we did it.
We did it.
Career, our first career episode, career Velvet Underground. I'm sure when we get into career of someone who, like Rolling Stones or something, we might even have to limit the conversation to where it's like career, but just in the 70s or something.
Yes, like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. Yeah, there's just so much stuff.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think they're endlessly fascinating, the Velvet Underground, and they've got a little bit of something for everybody. They're dark and edgy. I think some of their music is pretty scary, and there's kind of a menacing quality to it, but then it can be also just gorgeous and really beautiful and influential on a lot of what happened.
Well stated. Yeah, I think their influence is beyond what even, of course, there's a famous, I think Brian Eno said, like, only 1,000 people bought the album, and every single one of them started a band. And that's probably true. Lou is kind of an everyman. He feels like a guy, not like Paul
McCartney
from outer space, like David Bowie or something like that. So, all right. So that's subscribe if you liked this, and we'll be maybe next one will be a album, maybe will be a song, or maybe we'll talk about another career here on Song, Album, Career with Chris and Dave.